you're hungry and craving something, but you don't want a full meal, but you still want something that's delicious and satisfying? Well, for me, it's the same for some fantasy books. Sometimes I need a break from those epic fantasy series or those 800-page monstrosities, and I just want something short to cleanse the palate or to give me some great fantasy feels. So today I've got 8 fantasy book recommendations that are either short novels or novellas that, though they may be small, they pack an epic full meal size punch. The first book I have for you is The Deep by River Solomon. It centers around Yetu and the Wajenru people, who are basically merfolk. They are actually the descendants of pregnant African women slaves who were thrown overboard by slave masters. Yetu is a very, very special and revered person in her people. She is the holder of all the memories and the history of her people. They perform a ritual once a year where Yetu is basically forced to remember and transfer these memories over to her people so they can remember their history as well. However, this process is slowly killing Yetu, and she decides to flee. When she swims away from the Wajenru, she discovers a whole lot of people on land. Not only does she make discoveries about the world around her, she also discovers the importance not of just her own role, but of the role of her people in this world. This was a profoundly moving novel. Yetu is both compelling and nuanced. You struggle with her as she performs these rituals, as well as understand her need to get away and just discover a life of her own. And what she chooses at the end also is a deeply satisfying conclusion to the story. While The Deep is a short read, it's not necessarily an easy one either because of the importance it holds in the history of mankind. You are not only moved by Yetu's own personal story, but of those of her people and of those of the African slaves in the U.S. history. I really found The Deep to be a compelling, captivating, and important read for anyone today. And I highly recommend you listening to the audio if you're able to, because Daveed Diggs is the narrator. In fact, River Solomon wrote this book based on music that Daveed Diggs did with his group. And if you're unfamiliar with Daveed Diggs, he's one of the original cast members of Hamilton. For an important moving tale with fantastical elements that speaks to the importance of remembering our own history, I highly recommend The Deep by River Solomon. One of my favorite reads of the year is Even Though I Knew the End by C.L. Polk. We follow Helen, who is a detective and has sold her soul to the devil to save her brother's life, something he has still not forgiven her for. When Helen is offered a job to hunt down a serial killer, she decides to turn it down because she just wants to enjoy the rest of her life with the woman she loves. However, the person offering her job sweetens the deal by offering her a chance to regain her soul and live out the rest of her life with the woman she loves, Edith. There are angels and demons and magic, oh my. The reason I loved this book is because it has a film noir feel to it. From the descriptions of the setting to the incredibly cool clothes that they wear and the dialogue, you feel like you're watching a 1930s era film. It was highly entertaining, but at the same time, the characters had such depth and you were rooting for Helen and Edith the whole way through. There's action, there's magic, there's fantastical creatures, as well as plot twists and turns. For such a short novel, this was a wild ride and I had a blast with it, and I think you will too. Akwaeke Emezi has slowly become one of my all-time favorite authors, and her novel Pet is no exception to this. Pet revolves around Jam, a young transgendered girl who lives in an almost utopian-like society where monsters, the humankind, have been eradicated when her mother was young, through some sort of revolution that she really doesn't know much about. However, Jam is starting to suspect that not all these human monsters were actually eradicated because she suspects that something is happening to one of her good friends. One day, Jam is in her mother's art studio and hurts herself with a little bit of blood dripping on one of her mother's paintings. And suddenly, the monstrous creature within that painting becomes alive. At first, Jam is terrified, but then she realizes that this is no monster. In fact, this is a monster hunter whose only goal is to get rid of every monstrosity out there and keep the people safe. I don't know if any of you have read anything by Akwaeke Emezi, but her writing style and her prose is absolutely beautiful. It doesn't matter how long or short her novels are, the nuance and depth to her characters are absolutely captivating. Every book I've written by her, I fall in love or am mesmerized by the characterization that she displays through her writing. Pet is no exception. Jam is somebody that you root for, and her journey to discover what is really going on with her best friend and if there are actually still monsters there is profoundly moving. More than that, this book speaks a lot about trusting your gut, and what you don't know can indeed actually hurt you. If you've not read anything by Kweki Emezi, this snack-sized novella is a great way to start getting into her works because she is a phenomenal writer. Another one of my favorite reads of the year is Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. This is a beautifully written story about grief and loss. Miri and Leah are a married couple. Leah is a marine biologist and has just returned from a month-long expedition deep under the ocean in a submarine. She has not spoken much about what happened, but something terrible did happen during her expedition. And Miri is left helpless and hopeless, watching her beautiful wife deteriorate into seemingly madness as her body is basically turning into water. This is a haunting tale about love and, like I mentioned before, grief and loss. Julia Armfield has a way with prose that is almost lyrical, and it just captivates you into this story. You move back and forth between the expedition with Leah and present day with Mira, and it is done seamlessly and beautifully. Like some of the other books I've mentioned, this is not an easy read, but it is moving, and it does have a satisfying yet heartbreaking ending. The Emperor's Soul by Brandon Sanderson is a fantastic snack-sized book. And if you haven't read any of his books, especially those of his Cosmere, this is actually a great way to enter his world. The Emperor's Soul follows Shai, or Shay, I'm not actually sure exactly how to pronounce it, who is a magical forger. She is able to rewrite the history of any object through her great skill of magic. By rewriting the history, she's able to change its appearance, its feel, you name it, she can do it. When she's arrested and sentenced to death, she's basically given with one task to save her life. You see, there was an attempt on the Emperor's life, and he is basically left in a comatose state. So in order to save her own, Shai is given the task to rewrite his soul. For such a short story, so much happened in it. It was fast-paced. The magic, as always with Brandon Sanderson, was absolutely fascinating. It is actually set in the same world as his first ever published novel, Elantris, though you do not have to read it to understand this because the magic system is actually different. Shai is a compelling character. I fell in love with her spunkiness, her determination, and the way she problem solves and basically dupes everyone around her. I am a huge fan of Brandon Sanderson. I love everything about his writing. I appreciate his dialogue and his characterization. And even though The Emperor's Soul is really just a novella, it reads like those monster books of his as well, and you are left deeply satisfied with the ending. And, it's a good idea to read this book if you're going to be dipping your toes into his Cosmere, because it may or may not come into play at one point. Love The Emperor's Soul. It was one of my favorite standalones by Brandon Sanderson, and it could be yours too if you pick it up. This Is How You Lose the Time War by Max Gladstone is a favorite among many people. Full disclosure, it is not one of my favorites, but I know so many people love it, which is why I'm recommending it. Red and Blue are rival agents in a war that is spanning time and space. These two women work alone and they send each other letters, even though they're fighting on opposite sides of the war and are basically looking to destroy the other side. These letters make the two of them fall in love with each other. Now, while I didn't love this book necessarily, I did find it quite fascinating. Red is on the side of the agency, which is what the synopsis describes as, and I quote, post-singularity technotopia. Blue belongs to Garden, which is basically a single vast consciousness that is embedded in all organic matter. There are really fascinating themes and topics in this book. For me, I found it a little slow, but most people love it, and I can see why, because the writing is lyrical and it is just such an interesting topic. So even though I may not have loved this book, I think a lot of people will find this snack-sized novella very entertaining. A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers is a cozy, delightful, and profound novella. We follow sibling Dex. He is a tea monk who travels from city to city and town to town, listening to people and offering them tea. Sibling Dex's world is pretty utopian. There is legend, though, of robots who once existed, became self-aware, realized they wanted no more with humanity, dropped everything, and pretty much disappeared. Now, while Sibling Dex does live in this kind of utopia, he's also become just very tired of his life. He's not finding his purpose anymore. He's becoming restless and he doesn't know what to do. And then one day he runs into one of these robots from legend. And the robot only has one question for sibling Dex. What do people need? And with that question in mind, the two embark on a journey together to find the answer to this question, as well as the answer to what is sibling Dex's purpose in life. This is a thought-provoking, delightful little tale. If you want something cozy for the fall, something to make you more self-aware and to reflect upon your own purpose and your own needs and desires in life, this is a great book. And if you enjoy A Song for the Wild Build, A Prayer for the Crown Shy is a follow-up novella. I still haven't read it yet, but it is definitely on my TBR. Becky Chambers' writing is easily accessible, and this is a profound story, even though it is tiny. If you want a book with a big punch but a snack-size feel, I highly recommend it. Leaning more into science fiction rather than fantasy is All Systems Red by Martha Wells, which is the first book in the Murderbot Diaries. This is set in the future, and on a planet there is an exploratory mission. Every exploratory mission has to bring one of these sec units, this AI android, to help them on their mission. And on this exploratory mission, we have Murderbot, an android who just wants to be left alone to discover who they are and who has been able to hack into the system and become self-aware. A neighboring mission, though, has gone dark, and this whole team realizes that something is not right. So it is up to the team and Murderbot to uncover the mystery of what has happened. This was a highly entertaining novella. I kind of fell in love with our Murderbot and their cynicism and their self-talk and the way they begrudgingly help the humans. There was action, there was mystery, and it is obviously a foundation for the series. I unfortunately have not read the rest of the series. I intend to. They're just got a little bit of money for such small books, so I'm going to wait to get it from the library. However, this was a fun ride, and I cannot wait to get to know Murderbot a little bit more because for an AI, they are extremely compelling, and I look forward to seeing more of their self-discovery. This is big time fun for a snack-sized book. Sorry, all this talk of snacks has gotten me a little hungry, and we're back. I digress. So 8 great small-sized novels with epic feels and epic punches. Let me know if you've read any of them, and if you're planning to read any of them as well, or if you have any of your own recommendations for small fantasy novels or novellas. If you're enjoying this content and recommendations, it would mean the world to me if you're able to hit the like or subscribe or both buttons. I really enjoy making this content and want to know if I should keep doing it. And if you're looking for more fantasy book recommendations, please feel free to check out my video about my top 5 fantasy standalone novels. There are some great reads in there as well. Thank you so much for watching, everybody, and happy reading.